Welcome into Conversations with Paul Brown. We're in Pelzer at the historic Pelzer Auditorium that is now home to the Milltown Players. And Will Ragland is our guest. He's got somebody else he's going to bring on. And they've got a great play coming up that starts right now and runs through next weekend. It's called Smoke on the Mountain, and he's going to tell us all about that. You grew up, Will, not far from here. What do you remember about those fun days in Powdersville?
I did grow up in Powdersville. I went to the Wren schools, had a very creative childhood, but no real outlet for performance. My sister and I would put on little skits in our living room and in our backyard, and we would do theater before we even knew what it was.
And then when it came time to go to college, what were your aspirations at that point? What did you want to do, and what did you want to get out of college?
That's a great question. I really wasn't sure. You know, I was always a visual art student, and it really wasn't until a teacher of mine named Joe Hood, a math teacher at Wren High School, forced me to be in a play. I was a shy art student, and I was helping to paint the set, and she said, there's something about being a thespian that complements being an artist. And of course, my first question was, what the heck's a thespian?
Can you spell it?
Yeah, right. And so she forced me into Annie Get Your Gun, a bit part, and I said, I'll do it, but I refused to sing.
Okay.
It was one line. I had to sing, doing what comes naturally. And of course, I spoke it, and I said, doing what comes naturally? And, you know, it was terrible, but that was my first taste. And then I took a course called Service Learning at Wren, where I was asked to donate my time to a nonprofit. And I found, through a friend, the South Carolina Children's Theater.
In Greenville.
In Greenville, downtown Greenville, before it was the amazing place that it is today, in the old Belk's department store right on Main Street, where you could find parking very easily. And so I walked into those doors and helped to paint a set back in 1995. And that really is where things started to change. It felt like, in many ways, that's when my life began, is when I started working with the South Carolina Children's Theater. And they encouraged me to audition. And it really was my senior year of high school when I discovered them and was turned on to theater, which is the integration of all art forms and a social art form. And I loved the elements that were that I discovered there. And then when I went to college, I did continue my study of both art and theater, and ended up majoring in art at Davidson College. I was in a couple of shows, and I got to do some set work and some design work, and it was great to finally really be able to study it in a classroom setting, because there really wasn't much offered at Wren High School in terms of a class or a program, and I felt like I missed out growing up as a child, that if I had discovered this earlier on, at an earlier age, it really would have benefited me in a way that who knows what would have happened.
So you graduate from Davidson with a degree in what, and what do you plan to do with it?
Studio art. And if you major in art, you can do two things. You can make art and sell it, or go to grad school. And I wanted to do neither of those things. And so I, around that time, the South Carolina Governor's School for the Arts and Humanities started their year-round program, their residential school. And I had been a hall counselor there during my time at Davidson. And of course, I also went to the Governor's School when it was a summer program at Furman back in '94 for visual arts. And it was the first time I really took the arts seriously. Okay. And so I'd already had that connection. They needed full-time, year-round hall counselors, residence life counselors. And so it was a perfect job to come out of college with an arts degree and not really know what you wanted to do, but you enjoyed working with that program that it meant so much to me to change my life for the better. And so I was there with the inaugural class, the first class who graduated from the Governor's School. I was their hall counselor, which meant we took care of everything having to do with the kids besides teaching. We lived on the hall, we worked with these gifted students. And that was really the first time I worked with young people in that capacity, and I was there for 2 years.
How did you end up at Palmetto?
That is a great story. I hope you'll listen. It's a long one. I'll make it short. But I was in, I still didn't know what I wanted to do, okay? I was around 2002, I was in this play called Oliver. You've heard of it, the musical Oliver, at the Children's Theater. I was playing Fagin, and it was really one of the first roles I took 100% seriously. And I loved it, and I really took it to my full potential, what I felt like I could do. And I was working with all these kids. I learned all their names. It was so much fun. And during rehearsal, this man walked up to me. He said, "Do you know who I am?" I said, "Yes, sir, you're Dr. Harner." It was the superintendent of Greenville County Schools, and I knew who he was because my mother was a teacher, a guidance counselor at Plain Elementary for years and years and years. And he said, "You work well with these kids. You ever thought about teaching?" And my first thought in my mind was, of course, no, because I'd seen the stress that my mother had gone through, and I wanted none of that. And so I flatly rejected him. And he would not let up. He said, "There's this program, it's called PACE, Program for Alternative Certification for Educators. You majored in art. That is an area that you can enter this program into." I said, "Thank you very much, not interested." And so I was planning on moving to Charleston and doing, I don't know, something. And I ended up being unemployed that summer. I was in town. He called my phone. He said, "There's one art position left in the whole county. I can't hire you, but I can get you an interview." And I showed up at Bryson Elementary in Fountain Inn. And I walked in, and I was thinking, well, maybe middle school, I don't know, something like the kids at the Children's Theater.
Right.
And the first thing the teacher said there was, "Well, if you get this job, you'll be teaching kindergarten and first grade. And we're going to put you in this portable out back, which was vandalized over the summer." And I thought, what have I gotten myself into? So I got the call that week. The teachers were already back at school, and they said, "You're our new art teacher. You're going to be at Bryson Elementary, and on Mondays you're going to Grove, and on Tuesdays you're going to Simpsonville. Good luck." And they threw me to the wolves. But this crazy thing is, it turned out to be the perfect fit because I absolutely loved teaching 5- and 6-year-olds about visual art. It was the most fun, and it was performance is what it was. It was a performing arts job, basically. And then I moved to Sioux Cleveland in Piedmont, near where I grew up. A former teacher of mine was the principal, Karen Chambers. She just retired. And I built the program there. And then it got to a point where, this is where it all began for me as a director. My kids were not seeing plays because they couldn't afford to. They lived in Piedmont. They didn't have disposable income. And I was doing shows with the Children's Theater still then. And I really got angry. I thought, this is not right. And I tried doing things like getting a Rotary Club to sponsor them to come see a show, but that just wasn't enough. And so I just got frustrated, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to direct a play. I'm going to do it myself. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no clue. I just jumped into it. We wrote our own adaptation of Alice in Wonderland. It was a blacklight production. It cast 60 children, and it sold out every night. And it was amazing to me, the change you saw in a child in just 2 months. Yeah. The change in communication skills and confidence and creativity. And I knew at that closing night performance, I said this, I said, you know, theater's changed me, and I know it's changed these kids. And then eventually, we did another show at the brand new high school, Woodmont High School, up the road, Wizard of Oz, with our Sioux Cleveland kids. We had 115 in the cast, and a live dog, and my principal played the Wicked Witch. She was great.
Had a lot of practice?
And then, no, maybe. No, she was a wonderful person, love her to death. But Woodmont High School gave me a call and said, "We want you to come here and teach art and start a theater program." And I thought, wow, that's amazing. And so I moved from elementary to high school, teaching art, and started the Wildcat Players of Woodmont High, which is entering into its 10th season next year, if you can believe that. Wow. And we started off with our first production, and we grew over time. I was at Woodmont for 8 years, and we ended up winning a state championship. We had huge sold-out shows. My last production I directed there was, again, Wizard of Oz. Had over 7,000 people come to see it over 3 weeks. And we have students now who have gone to college, majored in theater education, focusing in technical theater. Actually, one of my former students is our technical director here at Milltown Players. And so we did a lot at Woodmont. It grew to 2 full-time teachers and 6 different courses, and all because there was a need for quality live theater experiences for kids who may not be able to afford it, just like me back in Powdersville. Yeah. And so that is what spawned the idea, a continuation of that theory or that thought that this should happen. Because oftentimes, and understandably so, you don't get quality and affordable in the same place. Yeah. Usually if it's really good, it's really expensive. Yeah. And if it's really cheap, you're going to get what you pay for, right? bless their hearts. They're doing all they can.
Right.
So that was my goal, to introduce a community theater that was affordable and quality, and using all the skills and talents that I had learned and developed within my 20-something years of experience as an actor and director and designer in the Greenville theater arts scene. And so I had built up Woodmont to a place where it could sustain itself. Palmetto called. It's my home district where I grew up in Anderson 1. They said, Will, we have a position for an elective. Would you like to come do what you did here at Woodmont and start over? And I thought, well, not getting any younger. If I'm ever going to do this again, now's the time. And Palmetto is such a wonderful place.
Yeah.
It's very much like Woodmont, about half the size, great kids, and we are starting from scratch. I'm in year 2 of the Mustang Stage Company of Palmetto High, and in our season 3 at Milltown Players. So there's the story, Paul. I talked your ear off.
No, you didn't. You were great. We're going to come back and talk about the Milltown Players. We got to take time out for a commercial.
I'm telling you, when that bus started tipping over, I thought we'd be swimming for sure. Whew. Vera's legs were sticking straight up in the air.
There's a church in the valley of the Rhine.
Will, give me a history of this facility, the auditorium, because this dates back. It's got a rich history. It dates back a long time. Just briefly tell me that.
Pelzer's a great little town that was started in 1881 when they built the Pelzer Mill right on the Saluda River. And like so many towns in the upstate, it is a mill town. That was the purpose of its construction. And they had a fantastic president, Captain Smythe, who ran the mills and the town. And he built all sorts of great buildings for the citizens, the mill workers who lived here. And one of them was this auditorium, built around 1920.
Okay.
And it was for the school, which was the Pelzer School, Pelzer High School, and eventually Pelzer Elementary. And it was also for the town. And so this was a venue for traveling vaudeville shows, and also anything having to do with graduation exercises for the Pelzer School. And it went into disrepair. And the person we can thank for saving this is Wayne Fowler.
Yeah.
He was a principal
Right.
at Pelzer Elementary, and also superintendent of Anderson 1. He is a dear friend, and he's a great supporter of the arts and of this building. He has saved it more than once, sometimes coming in here and working on it with his family on the weekends to save it. And so they found some grant money several years ago and restored the interior to this beautiful space that you see now. It looks brand new, even though it's almost 100 years old.
Yeah.
And then when the recession hit, they had to close down the Pelzer School and consolidate with West Pelzer.
Right.
Due to a lack of funds to keep it going. It just made financial sense. But unfortunately, our town lost yet another thing for Pelzer. And so this building sat empty for about 6 years. Beautiful building. No one had any use for it. He called me and said, Will, I really want a community theater here. And a former teacher of mine, Lynn King at Wren Middle School, she ran the Heritage Players here. And she directed plays here before it was restored and beautiful.
Right.
And really, the Heritage Players set the foundation for the Milltown Players, because it got to the point where Lynn was, no one was directing plays, and she said, I'm going to dissolve this unless you want to take it over. And I thought, this is the best opportunity that I could dream of, to have an existing nonprofit that we could legally change the name and a space. And we had just enough money in their account to pay for our very first season and most of the first show. And by the grace of God, here we are today.
Tell me about that first dip in the cold water when you took that over.
Oh, boy. Well, we almost all died.
Drowned.
I had to direct and design 5 of the 6 productions while teaching full-time at Woodmont, and that was tough.
Yeah.
And we discovered real quick the type of shows people want to see and the type of shows they don't necessarily want to see.
What do we want to see?
We want to see country music. We want to see Southern humor, Southern comedy. We want to see musicals we know and love. We want to see shows that feature the music of the 50s and the 60s. And we want to see stories that we already know, that we read in school and we've come to love.
Yeah.
We want something familiar and safe and that comes from our region, stories and songs from the South. And I'm all for it. I love everything about those things.
You have now been working for a long time on Smoke on the Mountain.
Yes, sir.
And that, to a T, describes what we want to see.
You know it.
So tell us about this undertaking and who's working with you and a little bit about the play and the folks in
I
it.
would love to. The thing is, Paul, I'm blessed to have really talented friends. And a couple of years ago, my friends Tom and Tricia Dyer were here to see a show, and they stopped me right down there in front of the stage after a show one time, and they said, you know, Will, you ought to do Smoke on the Mountain. And I thought, oh, really? Well, let's talk sometime. And we did. We talked about it. And they and their friend McKelvey Wilder had done this show all over the country, about West Virginia, Illinois, Greenville, all over the place. So they knew it. And I thought, man, I think this is going to be good. I think this is just right for us. And then I thought about Myra Green, who used to direct and run the Greenwood Community Theater, and she had worked on this show several times, and she's the mother of one of my good friends, my good buddies, Graham Schaefer, who worked with us for a long time as a lighting designer in TD. And I called her up, I said, hey, Myra, how about let's do Smoke on the Mountain again? And so really assembling this team of professionals and also our Milltown favorites, Libby Cruz and Aaron Pennington, and our newcomer, my dear friend, Mary Catherine Sosby. We've got this dream team of performers who are fit to a T for Smoke on the Mountain.
Well, we were very, very fortunate to have Tricia Dyer to be the musical director. So the first part of the whole process was learning the music, and there is a ton of music in this show, and it's wonderful gospel music with tight harmony and beautiful solos. And so Tricia's done a fantastic job of pulling all that together before I ever really got involved.
Well, it takes place in 1938 in a little old Baptist church in the Great Smoky Mountains of North Carolina. And the preacher, Reverend Oglethorpe, he's only been there a year, but he's trying to bring his congregation into the modern era through fellowship, through song. And he wants to introduce some new bluegrass and gospel music to sort of enliven his congregation. And he's found this family of singers, the Sanders family singers, who all sing and all play instruments. And he's invited them to his little church of Mount Pleasant to have a Saturday night sing for his congregation and others in the town to try and bring them all into the modern world.
How hard was it for you to get to be the preacher?
Well, it's funny because my granddad always told me that he wanted me to be a Baptist preacher. And this is my opportunity to make good on that wish of his. And they all had encouraged me to play this role. I wasn't going to play it at first, but I am loving it. It's so much fun. And my mother grew up, of course, in the Southern Baptist Church, and I grew up Methodist, so it's not that far off.
Talk about the cast members and what they bring to the play.
Well, each one of them is so richly talented, and they all bring their own little flavor to this show. Wouldn't you agree to that?
Oh, yeah.
The voices, the blend of the voices, and you just really couldn't find people that are more suited for these characters. They're just absolutely perfect for these characters. We have Libby and Aaron, who are our twins, and they just act exactly like little twins that are always picking on each other and doing things. And then their voices blend perfectly together, so they sound like they're from the same family, even though they're not. So it's just a great, great group of people.
Of course, we've already talked about our friends, the Dyers and McKelvey Wilder, who are reprising their roles again. So they already are very familiar with these roles. And of course, Mary Catherine Sosby plays a very funny role of June Sanders. She signs, she does percussion. She's hilarious. And so we're real excited to get started and have an audience.
Well, tell us about when folks can come to Pelzer to see the Milltown Players.
Absolutely. Pelzer is a short drive from anywhere, less than 30 minutes from Anderson, from Greenville, from Simpsonville, Fountain Inn, from Easley. Anywhere you live, you can drive to Pelzer. It's so easy. It's on Highway 8, also known as Lebby Street. And the Pelzer Auditorium sets back behind the Methodist Church and the school next door. We opened last night to a record crowd, the biggest crowd we have had yet in Milltown Players history. It's true. And you can come see us again. We run on Thursday through Saturday nights at 7:30 p.m. and Sundays at 3 p.m. And we're going to run through June the 4th. The easiest way to get tickets is to go online at milltownplayers.org. Or you can just show up at the door and buy your tickets then. But if you do, you're probably going to have to climb the steps and sit in the balcony.
We want to thank you all for sharing your story, and we're going to be able to give our listeners a little taste of what they can expect when they come to Pelzer to hear Smoke on the Mountain. So we're going to tell you right now, we want to thank everybody for tuning in. We want to thank you all for sharing your story, and we invite all of you to be back with us next time for our next edition of Conversations with Paul Brown. Until then, take care, everybody.
Now, these are my twins. Denise, she's the girl.
Thank y'all for having us.
And Dennis, he's the boy.
Thank y'all.